So great to see everybody. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the upcoming AI changes and intersections with crypto. And we will go through a set of topics first, and we'll have a bit of room for questions towards the end. And so if you have some questions, just kind of you'll have a chance to ask them towards the end. Cool. So figured we would get started with some of the basic intersections between crypto and AI. And so we'll maybe throw some ideas out there. And after that, we'll then walk into thinking about AI in a larger scale. But let's just get started with there. Alex, what are the intersections that you see, and especially as you build WorldCoin, what are the kinds of things that you value in crypto as kind of tools for building a project like this?
So broadly speaking, I think it kind of helps to start with what will AI actually change in the world. And I think, for one, it's wealth creation. For two, it's like it will be able to imitate humans really well, as it already is to some degree. So the internet will be a very different place. The economy will need to change and will drastically change. And what are the things, well, why Sam actually started WorldCoin, where we started working on it 3 years ago. A couple of the motivations were where I think also crypto can help is governance of AI systems. I think crypto has some of the best privacy tools that's going to be very important as AI becomes increasingly powerful. And a little further out, 5 to 10 years maybe, is probably wealth distribution. So UBI is, we believe, actually will happen. And it will need to happen on a global scale. What do you think? What did I miss?
Yeah, fully agree there. So AI systems are going to start replacing, or have already started replacing, humans in all kinds of tasks. I think Hans Moravec had this model for the rising tide of AI capabilities. And so you can think of a large landscape with hills and valleys of different capabilities that humans have. And so you can think of where writing or art or things like poetry or software engineering or maybe very mechanical things like actuating some motors in a drone or making some object or classifying some images or whatever, right? And so humans can do all of those things. Intelligent agents can do that. And so you can think of a rising tide of AI capabilities over time taking over more and more and more of those kinds of things. As that happens, humans move higher up in that stack to focus their work and energy on other tasks that humans are uniquely capable of leveraging. But then long term, once AI really fully is able to do anything, then at that point, if we can build AI as a tool set, then we are freed from having to work and expend huge amounts of labor to get basic things. We now have super high leverage systems to achieve massive scale outcomes. And then at that point, we'll need new ways of organizing resources and organizing capital and organizing how we get to allocate the resources to various kinds of efforts. And so from that perspective, I think things like UBI are inevitable. We'll have to reshape our economies with systems like this. And so it's a crucial moment now to build the tools that we need in order to support those kinds of systems.
And how do you think the internet is going to change?
The internet is going to change tremendously. I mean, first, there's both the infrastructure layer being reshaped by AI systems. So both the computing platform itself will become much more AI powered. So everything from how you think about cloud systems and the underlying machinery is going to stop being built by humans in kind of like, you can think of the way we produce software today as like an organic free-range artisan process where humans are like twiddling bits on a text file to like program the machine. And a lot of those pipelines are going to get reshaped by AI systems. And so you'll have pretty large models that are able to do a lot of what the underlying infrastructure can do. But then on top of that, you'll have full systems and agents that are AI powered being entities and objects on the internet that you can call into and invoke to do certain kinds of processes. We're already starting to see that today with many of the AI systems and the AI APIs. But as soon as you start thinking of crypto systems and broader, larger scale open networks, you can build these kinds of utilities in a public way that anyone can sort of access the machinery and just sort of pay in the kind of traditional crypto network sort of way, invoke a transaction with some gas fees to be able to cause certain sets of outcomes.
Okay. We wanted to talk about different timelines, time horizons. So what's your AGI timeline?
Oh man, my AGI timeline has shrunk a lot in the last 10, 15 years. Been following a lot of this very closely for a long time. I used to, 10, 15 years ago, I used to think AGI was about 2040s-ish. I was never as conservative as thinking, or maybe not never, but in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, I haven't been as conservative as saying, 100 years. And in the last few years, it's shrunken down to probably 2030s. So I would say like early in the 2030s, maybe late 2030s. But I also wouldn't be that surprised. The bulk of the distribution is there. I wouldn't be that surprised if we figure it out in the next 5 to 8 years. What about you?
My timeline is 2028.
Yeah.
Because that's at Sam's timeline, and I think he
he
has figured that part out. So yeah, my general point is that I think things are only getting much crazier from here, much more than we anticipate. I think the internet is going to change drastically, as you said, but I think that's actually going to be one of the first things that we're going to see in the next 2 years. I don't think we even need much more advanced systems. We just need the current level much wider accessible and much easier to use. So I think that's already within reach. Should we?
And as that starts happening, think of the economic shifts that are going to occur worldwide, right? As you have AI systems that are capable of doing what most humans can and what large collections of humans can. Think about how difficult it is to organize groups of people today. Think about corporations or nations or communities. Think about all of the time and energy and effort that goes into coordinating humans to work together on a thing. And imagine all of that cost evaporating, and now you have systems that are capable of coordinating at massive scale instantaneously, or instantaneously from our perspective, close to instantaneously. So that'll be fascinating in terms of the shifts that it's going to cause on all economic production globally. And so that's why we have to, if that's 2028, then we have to build much better economic infrastructure now to allocate resources much better in that time horizon, which is a good segue, I guess, to UBI. Back to UBI. So what do we need to build UBI, actually?
Why we need to build UBI?
No, what do we need to build it? So we've sort of like motivated, and for people not familiar, UBI is Universal Basic Income. It's an economic model where humanity decides that, hey, you shouldn't have to work in order to survive. You should be able to have the right to have some economic income to be able to pay for goods and services, like, think of a Maslow's hierarchy type structure, and you should be able to buy shelter, food, water, and so on, and eventually get to self-actualization and whatnot. So it's difficult to build that. So what are the tools that we need to put in place?
Well, I think we need 3 things. We need a way to identify everyone. We need a way to economically reach these identified people, and then we need a way to actually produce the wealth that we want to distribute. And that's not an accident why we built Rollcoin the way it is built, because it's a way to identify everyone while still remaining private, economically reach everyone, and well, I think the economic driver will be AI. There's nothing else in the world right now that could reach such a scale.
Yeah, how do you, let's maybe take each one of those. So identifying everyone in the world. So this is where you have World ID. Can you maybe break down how what the landscape looks like there? Like, is that basically like solve problem now with the orb, and you're just now onboarding people, or are there problems that remain there, or?
Yeah. So what Rollcoin can do today is it can do deduplication, which is the hardest piece. So when you talk about identity, you have first of all, mostly all the things that you usually use actually do solve one level above deduplication. Deduplication is usually the only entities that solve these problems are governments. When you get your passport or you get your KYC. So I'm a German citizen. I show up to get my passport. What the German government does is it checks that I'm the only person called Alex Blania with that address and that face and that passport. And that's a really hard problem to solve because you need much more information to compare all of these users to each other. And Rollcoin can do that. The orb can do that. The second part is re-authentication, so making essentially sure that you don't have those identities be traded around and moved around and things like that. That's going to be solved with World ID 2.0. That's going to ship in a couple of weeks actually at this point. And then I think we are pretty solid, other than it will be a constant arms race also against AI. So I think it will constantly need to improve. There will be massive attacks, and at some point certainly nation state kind of attacks on the system. So it will be constantly in a race to improve.
Have you thought about maybe economic mechanisms to get like a white hat hacker sort of environment emerging, that like you try and get the community to try and break the systems with a good solution in mind?
Yeah, it's going to come, but right now we are much more rudimentary.
Cool. So that's the broader first part of authentication. Now, in terms of economically reaching everybody, so there we can lean on all of the crypto successes over the last 10 years of building wallet infrastructure, blockchains, payment processing, and so on. You've also shipped a beautiful mobile app wallet that actually helps Web3 cross the chasm into like a product that you could actually see non-crypto people use. So congratulations there, because that's a surprisingly high bar relative to the rest of the industry. But there's probably other more interesting ways of economically reaching people. Like, how are you guys thinking about what you can do once you have addressed all of the people on the planet?
Well, I honestly think that we enter a point where talking to governments will be a major issue, a major topic, and kind of understanding what the actual governance of the distribution is and things like that. So I think again, crypto can help with kind of token distributions and smart contracts and all of these things that make such things easier. But I honestly think it's going to get very complicated.
Yeah. For me, some really interesting things come out where now that you can reliably identify people and you have a wallet for them, you can start enabling them to participate in funding flows of all kinds of things. So grant making becomes easier. Governance of large systems becomes easier because you can couple the participation with decision making across some components or whatever. So you can think of like making services that as a user you have like a very direct, non-civil, civil resistant way of checking what the users think should happen in the network or in the system or whatever, and directing the behavior of a system. And that enables you to like kind of economically reach a lot of people in terms of enabling them to participate in the production flow of some economy. And there's a bunch of like interesting things that are now are possible. Now you have things like World ID. Super interested in public goods and how that you can enable a lot of participants to build much better structures for allocating your resources to services, or like the build out of infrastructure like R&D and so on, out of things like this. And the third part, like how do we connect it to the AI wealth generation?
Well, I have this unpopular opinion that I think it's kind of the top-notch AI field will stay relatively monolithic for a lot of reasons. I think, I mean, I have background in AI. I did deep learning before, but then of course now with OpenAI, I think I see maybe one layer deeper than people usually do. I don't think, as much as I believe in open source models and all of these things, I think like the cutting edge of the research will kind of exponentially ramp up in funding that is required to train these models and kind of to actually work on the cutting edge. So what this means is I think we steer towards a world where you have a handful, literally a handful of entities that are actually on the cutting edge. And I think that the delta between being at the cutting edge and kind of being one layer behind that and kind of building in the open source is going to increase, not decrease. And so what this means is I think like if you talk about building such things for the world, you will need to build it with these labs. And I think it's going to lead to a lot of interesting social challenges because kind of in the United States, we had many of these antitrust issues historically, and then, I don't know, with Meta, Facebook, it was raised, I think, 2 years ago. But I think the economic impact that these AI labs will have is going to be much, much bigger, and the social impact much, much higher. So,
from my perspective, like and sorry to interrupt you, but my perspective is the current tools that we have to organize production, like, you know, all of capital and all of corporate structuring, and even how nation states work, isn't tuned for the reality of a capability set like this. How do we, if we kind of like, in the crypto world, we get to imagine a lot of new economic models and a lot of new governance systems and a lot of new structures. Do you think that there's like some feasible way of steering towards some outcome where, you know, this handful of labs that have the capability set and are generating tremendous levels of wealth for the planet are kind of now connected to the kind of like economic flows for the entire world? Like basically, how do we make it such that not just one lab like OpenAI, but all of the labs are contributing to the UBI model and other economic structures for the benefit of all?
Yeah, there is there's work already happening on this, which I think is actually, I'm not sure if all labs are in agreement, but at least I think the major people I know at the major labs are somewhat in agreement, and it comes down to the idea of the windfall tax. There's a paper you can read. That's literally the title. The title is windfall tax, and I think there's some GDP boundary. So like as soon as you have one model or one entity that creates more than 2.5% of the global GDP, the rest will need to feed into a windfall tax. And then this taxation gets distributed with the rest of the world. So I think, again, this is going to be a tricky moment because those AI labs will have different incentives than their governments. And so we're going to see. And obviously, this is not what I'm an expert on. But
yeah. And it gets super tricky, too, because the labs, being in different governments, also are kind of bound by different kind of goals or incentive structures. Like, how do we kind of apportion the production output of these labs to the whole world in kind of like a good forward-looking way that doesn't just kind of like prioritize the last couple hundred years of economic development, right? So like we are in the world that we are today in part due to a very highly path-dependent history that took a bunch of twists and turns and landed certain regions of the world with stronger economic cultures, with stronger capability sets. And if we, in this moment, as we're kind of in this phase transition to a very different future, we get the opportunity to kind of rewrite some of those flows to end up with something that is much more human-oriented as opposed to kind of like historical benefit-oriented. So I don't know, how are you guys thinking about this kind of stuff? Because it's like super key when it comes to kind of the communities that you're building and the path that you're building and so on.
You mean that eventual future of distributing something like this?
Yeah, it's kind of like the current, like if you just take kind of the current GDP distribution of the world and you or even like the current population distribution of the world, and then you kind of like just flow resources proportionally. That'll work for certain kinds of things, but it won't work for others. And so how do we, like for example, in the windfall tax, how do you implement that windfall tax in a global way? Like how are you going to get like governments to agree that that's like good, in that, you know, governments will suddenly be fighting each other to kind of collect that tax?
I mean, the best answer that I have is Rollcoin. That's why we built it.
So just go straight to the people, windfall tax straight to the
you
people.
have like an open source protocol that I can have an open actual protocol that is a tax solution that actually solves that problem, and people can use, and we can show an example of doing it, and maybe others will follow. Okay, so we talked now. I think we talked a lot about UBI, which is cool. But what are, if you think about the risks, and you also like a little bit more short term, what are the specific risks that you see that we will likely enter?
So in the short term, I think that there's high possibility of a bunch of malicious use cases where some parties deploy models in pretty nefarious ways, or very accidentally end up with rogue optimizers. So for example, you could take a blockchain today and couple it with some models that take actions that maximize the amount of money in a wallet, and just kind of give it access to the internet and just let it run wild. Like you could have done this years ago. There's people on Reddit showing videos of like stuff like this. Nothing quite very significant yet because these models are not smart enough yet. But at some point that becomes a problem. So we have to kind of get ahead of that and build structures that let us understand what models might be running in the world and what might they be doing, to understand how to protect against risks like that. So things like provenance become super, super important. What about you?
I think that's true, but I don't think we will be able to understand that. I think essentially we just need to have some kind of firewall against certain things. I think such a firewall mechanism will become very critical, which is
a firewall between kind of like the model.
AI.
Yeah. Do you mean like not being able to run certain models, or?
Like I think you're gonna need like human-only actions, essentially, that like at least a human needs to sign off on, which we have naturally, and I think that's also how things will naturally play out. But I think this whole idea of having human-only actions, having human-only zones. I mean, I think one of the things we discussed last week internally, or kind of actually at a dinner, not internally in the company, is next year the US elections are going to come. And what these systems are very capable of is changing, or will be, is changing public opinion, and finding ways to frame certain messages. So I think like the whole angle of marketing and public opinion is going to be a massive, massive thing, and probably my guess is it will enter kind of the major public discussion next year, and it's going to be freaking wild, I think. And it's only going to increase because, like, I always think about, which is not a great thing to say at a party, but kind of our brains are just a certain probability distribution of what we like, what we don't like, and experiences we had in our life. And I think neural networks will be very good at mapping these things out very quickly with historical data, and
They already are.
already are, but will be much, much better. And so we will all be very easy to influence in pretty much every dimension. So I don't have a good answer. I think it's just going to happen. It's going to be.
Yeah, that's a big risk that we have to get ahead of, because that is coming at us pretty fast. The last couple of elections have shown in the US and the last 8 years around the world have shown us just how manipulable democracies have gotten through social media and the internet and so on. This is about to get on hyperdrive, so for the builders out there, figuring out solutions to this kind of stuff now is pretty important, because those democracies and other government systems are going to be making huge decisions about the outcomes for the future for a lot of people.
How do you think we can solve it? Like, what's your take?
It's pretty hard. Like I think I tend to think that the way you solve this fundamentally is in enabling people to learn dramatically more than they can learn today. And so you have to inoculate. Think of it kind of like, I tend to see idea distribution or like memetics the same way as you think about biological genes or genetics. And so you have these idea strands that are moving around and occupying people. Some of them map to reality, some of them don't. Some of them are true, some of them are not. But the only thing that enables an idea to succeed is just self-replication and propagation, causing parties to want to propagate it. And so the benefit that we have is with good learning and good critical thinking, you can build internal defenses to be able to discern what is accurate and what is not, what is true and what is not, and be able to figure out what's good for you and your community and and the world, and what is actually bad. And turns out most people in the world, all of us, have failings there. We don't know everything. We don't, oftentimes can be emotionally manipulated into things, and we aren't super capable. However, through the last few thousand years, we've built out stronger and stronger systems to enable us to learn more and enable us to get process information much more safely. So I think we have to go straight to the core, because every other solution that kind of tries to interpose some software tool or some reputation system to try and like discern what's good or what's valuable or whatnot tends to get co-opted and tends to accumulate into kind of some mainstream dogmatic view that tends to degrade and tends to not actually be right in the long run, which is why things like the internet enabled us to interconnect and generate so much value and wealth creation recently, but it also has enabled a bunch of misinformation, manipulation, and so on. And so my sense is like we have to enable humans to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and we have to teach like critical thinking skill sets to be able to discern the likelihood of certain thing that you read online being actually true or good for you or whatever. And I think we have to do that in a massive scale, direct to consumer now. And I think almost everything else that is not addressing the root cause of the problem, like going straight to humans and their minds, will fall short in like a serious way that will sort of get co-opted somewhere. I don't know. I have like I don't know if like non-mainstream view on this, but like I think a direct-to-consumer learning platform is the key to that.
I think I'm much more pessimistic there, to be honest. I don't think that's gonna work. But I mean, obviously it's a great thing to do, and I think it's something we should do regardless. But I don't think it's gonna work. I think trying to figure out the direct analogy, but one of the crazier calls I had, I think, would be before even when I was in physics. So I did theoretical physics before that, and I talked to Jan Tallinn. You know Jan?
Yeah, I know Jan really well. Yeah.
And so Jan founded Skype, and now I think pretty much he founded the Future of Life Institute, I think.
Future of Life Institute and Future of Humanity Institute, and he's one of the I think if we make it as a species, Jan is one of the people that like will have great credit attribution for like funding a lot of really valuable work along the way.
Yeah, and so I talked to Jan, and like Jan has certainly a pretty dark, like he's pretty pessimistic about us surviving the next 20 years. He's a very smart guy, so it was a very dark conversation because I talked to someone that thought about everything quite deeply and had great analogies to everything, and I was like super optimistic and fun grad student working in AI and like everything is cool, and he was just like, no, we're all gonna die and the world is gonna burn.
High likelihood that he's not 100% certain but high likelihood that.
Right. And yeah, I think the best. Unfortunately, I think it's essentially going to be like we are. If you have an ape sitting in a zoo, and that ape doesn't even understand the context of a zoo, or does understand the context what it even means sitting here, right? So there's like so many concepts around that ape that influence the life of the ape, and well, or taking the same zoo example, a lion that is like physically much stronger than us, but we are a little bit smarter than the lion, like on the intelligence spectrum, not much actually, but completely superior to the lion. And so I think, unfortunately, that's how it's gonna look and feel much more. And so I think we might not even be able to comprehend or understand why our opinion is changing, or why we believe certain things, or why we act in a certain way. So I think the only short-term answer I have that I think is going to be very, very important, and Elon talks a lot about in a non-graceful way, is the idea that I think the internet needs to be rate limited in some sense. Like there's no way how you can let humans use AI to support what they're doing. I think that's going to be the more natural flow. Like you will not even write anything yourself anymore, but you will use in your browser on your computer AI systems to help you write certain things. But the important piece is that it's rate limited. So we have like public space of public opinion, like Twitter, X, where at least we understand that AI systems are not able to create the majority of the messages that are floated on there. I think if we don't have that for all of the major platforms that we use and the major services that we use, and I'm not trying to advertise, obviously World ID is some part of the solution, but I unfortunately do think that kind of the rate limiting piece is the only short-term answer I have. What do you think?
I disagree with the view that we will end up. Well, I think we're more like the animals in a zoo today than we will be in the future. In that, with certainly technologies and AI systems will make it dramatically easier for very hard things for humans to comprehend, to sort of like operate that way. But humans tend to be much more like that in the past, and in the last 2,000 years, 4,000 years, we've gotten dramatically better at understanding what's going on around us. And this is going to get enhanced in very quickly, right? So we'll start opening the barrier between the brain and the internet and being able to consume information dramatically faster. We'll figure out how to, any kind of success case has as part of its path the merger of AI, human systems with computing systems. And so that means brain-machine interfaces, starting to leverage neural networks as part of you, starting to like really remove the barrier between your personal computing assistive device that is not really part of your mind, and put it closer to your actual mind, somehow similar to how your neocortex wraps around your reptilian brains and your brainstem and so on. And so we're on a path in that direction. And eventually, at some point, it's a whole separate piece, but at some point we're going to figure out how to virtualize brains. This might be an easier problem if it's classical, the brain is just classical physics, much harder problem if it's quantum. Either way, you can virtualize them. And once you do that, you can now have fully digital humans, and you suddenly are untethered from the limitations of human minds today. So I think at that point, you have the full capability set as any AGI that we can conceive of to then kind of evolve up. But that, that's kind of like a 50 to 100, 200-year timescale. I think once we have AGI, we can be on a fast path to this. We could be on a really fast path to this if we really organize the resources of the planet around this. And I think you could break the barriers in BCI and get to whole brain emulation in 20 to 50 years. But that requires kind of like, Manhattan Project, Atlas program, like Saturn program, level organization of an effort, which I think becomes possible once you have AGI. But I think that that's kind of like the pathway. And kind of like right now, as a species, we're trying to like discern more about the world and kind of convince ourselves on how to best get to that pathway. But our recent history, like our lives are, our civilization is tiny in terms of time span. Like the land in this island is dramatically older than all of humans. And so like our civilization is like the blink of an eye relative to all other scales around us. And we're in this phase transition of going from pretty advanced apes in Africa, where we kind of developed, to now transitioning into this kind of digital life form. And that transition is very fast. It's about 100,000 to 1 million years, give or take. And so how we play the next 20 to 100 years is key to like ensuring that we're on a good path. And so I think like that's like the success case. Anything short of that, we probably get wiped out. And I'm more with Jan on that, in that like I don't think a path that is not in that direction is stable, and it eventually ends up in some catastrophic set of outcomes.
Yeah, I hope you're right. All right, unfortunately, I have to run.
Yeah.
But, this was a kind of crazier conversation than I think initially we wanted to do. We wanted to talk more about SDKs and things, but always fun to talk.
Yeah. Sorry. Same here. We took a very meandering path to the future, but more people seem to come in, so it seems like more interesting. We've ran out of time for questions, but thank you so much. Good to talk, and see you all around.
Thank you. Bye-bye.